They may not believe in climate change. They may not believe climate change is real. They may not believe it's happening, but you know who does? Clearly insurance companies. They're buying it because look at what they're doing down in Florida. They're gathering the sheep and they're getting the flock out. And as I said, look what happened in California. Are we surprised by it? No, corporate America always takes care of themselves. This again is why running a country, a government like a business, not such a great idea. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the tragedies that's going on out west and some of the pushback that we're seeing. For instance, Republican Representative Warren Davidson of Ohio. Maybe we'll just hold that disaster relief until California does some stuff. But I've asked my good friend Pete Dominick to come share some thoughts. Pete is the host of Stand Up with Pete. You can find his podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. Pete, thanks for taking time for us.
Always for you, Rick. Always a pleasure to join you. Such important issues to talk about, and great to see you, my friend.
So, what do you make of this? Shocking. State Farm, some of the insurers. Yeah, we're going to drop some people because hey, they're in high risk areas, and we don't want to have to pay claims.
There's a really interesting article about this in the New Yorker by Elizabeth Colbert titled "The Insurance Crisis That Will Follow the California Fires," because for years experts have warned that homeowner policies in the state could easily collapse. And I mean, it's almost inevitable. I don't really understand the nuances of how homeowners insurance works, or any insurance works, but I'm one for, publicizing it or making it, nationalizing it rather, because how could private insurance possibly be able to both pay out their policies and pay their employees and cover their costs? I mean, there's got to be some kind of minimum national insurance, especially now given, as you mentioned, the threats that are only going to become more and more often and more impactful, intense because of climate change. So whether it's Florida and floods, the Gulf Coast, or hurricanes and wildfires in the West, something's going to have to change, or you're not going to be able to own a home unless you're super wealthy and you don't necessarily need, insurance. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, some of these wealthy people, as you know, I'm sure probably read about, they've got private firefighters, but they still lost their homes, some of them. So it's a really fraught situation for this and so many other reasons as a result of climate. How do you possibly predict the actuarial outcomes of all of these different threats as climate change becomes more intense? And we just had our, hottest year on record, which is something we hear at the beginning of every year. Last year was the hottest year on record, and this year starts with the worst fire disaster maybe ever in America, in California for sure.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And for me, it's like a lot of this insurance things. I mean, we can argue health insurance as well. These companies set up in places where they can maximize their profits and they know how to mitigate their risks. And in areas that might be prone to fires, we're just not going to cover those areas.
Yeah, I mean, in California, they have a policy for homeowners who can't find fire insurance called the Fair Access to Insurance plan. It's called the FAIR plan. But it's operated by private companies, which pool the risks, and there's the same system in Florida, Louisiana, Texas, or similar entities. Colorado recently established one. And as insurers apparently have pulled out of California, the number of policies written by the state's plan, this FAIR plan, has ridden steep. It just keeps going up.
Right.
So since late 2023, apparently it's grown by more than 40%, Rick. So it's like nothing is going to be sustainable, even well-meaning government plans and policies. And it's hard to see where we go.
No, and this is the same argument I make for for health insurance. I mean, we have taken the sickest people out of the private health insurance market. As you know, most people use their health care first 5 years, last 5 years of life, and Medicaid picks up over half of the child births in this country and covers most children. And Medicare covers seniors for the final years of their life. We give the private corporations, the for-profit folks, we let them cherry pick the healthy people so they can make profit off them. And I fear we're doing well, I don't fear. We've actually done the same thing in all other facets,
Yeah.
where the profitable stuff we give to the private industries, and then we, the taxpayers, backstop everything else instead of just saying, "Hey, how about we just backstop it all?"
Yeah, well, when you have a society like ours, which is, I think, different than a lot of other civilized Western countries for sure, and more OECD countries, that is been taught for a few generations now to hate government and to think that government is the problem, and to think that the people who work in the government are just lazy bureaucrats. It leads to the conclusions that you're pointing to. I mean, that the government can't do anything, when in fact, obviously, it can do a lot of things. But when we look at these fires, it's a perfect example of just people not being able to handle a few ideas at once. People not being able to understand that a disaster like this is not simple. There wasn't a simple fix. There wasn't some way to prevent it that leaders looked away from. These are really complex disasters and issues. And even with the most well meaning policymakers and the most adequately funded resources, you would still have disasters like this.
Yeah,
And
but hold on, Pete. I saw Mel Gibson on one of those, Fox
yeah.
type shows saying, look, they might have done it on purpose, and they may have had all that water reserve gone, for nefarious means. Just asking.
Yeah, he's a despicable person. He's been making the rounds. I don't know why. He was on Joe Rogan, and while he was on Joe Rogan, spreading other conspiracies and lies, terrible ones like that. He knows people personally that have beat stage 4 cancer by taking some kind of sugar pill, you know, while he's spreading that dangerous, awful idea, his house was burning down. Mel Gibson is despicable. And I feel badly. I'm mad at myself for ever enjoying anything he ever did, even when I didn't know how bad he was. Like, I'm still like, I don't have enough just disdain that I could possibly verbalize for that man. He is an awful, awful person. And so are so many other people who are jumping on this and politicizing this. We have to be okay with and understanding of that there are certain situations in life that there's very little we could have done to prevent, and there's not a lot we can do to solve, but that we can learn from whatever's happening. When it comes to climate, I've been covering this issue my entire career, and the only real answer is to try to adapt. And it's messy, and people are going to die, and people are going to lose their homes, and it's not going to be easy, but we're going to have to keep trying to adapt as a species and trying to make the problem less worse. And, we're not doing a very good job of it. But in this case, it's a perfect example of the fact that people just can't possibly imagine that they don't have somebody, one person to blame, one
Yeah.
entity to blame. And if you did, it would be climate and it would be our species. But
No,
it's our,
no.
it's our entire species in that case. And that doesn't really make anybody feel better. So these complaints that they're making about the government and that it's Democrats and these threats that you mentioned from Congressman. I heard John Barroso on ABC's This Week basically saying we're going to have to take a look at these liberal policies that led to this disaster before we start handing out federal aid, as if that federal aid ever pivoted on the past decisions of politicians. It's really, really tough to hear a guy like him
I'm
or
with you.
anyone.
But there's help on the way. There's help on the way. Evidently, we're going to make Greenland a state. We're taking over somehow because according to JD Vance, there's a deal to be made on Greenland. And also, we're going to take over Canada. We're going to make that a state, the 51st state. So, if Byron Donalds is right, if we do make Canada the 51st state, that's two more Democratic senators. And Greenland, most certainly, there are going to be a couple Democratic senators, them and their 40% union density.
Mm.
So, as we're expanding the country, could actually be, I don't know, good. Maybe some people talking about unions, maybe the environment, maybe some good stuff coming out of that.
Well, Rick, when you look at Greenland, when you look at Canada, you've got a lot of ice, a lot of water. And if we're going to be able to build a giant funnel coming from Greenland, coming from Canada, as they say, and we're going to put all that ice and water on these fires, something that Sleepy Joe and Gavin Newscomb really just won't do because they're weak. They're weak, but we're gonna do it. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get it done. We'll see how it works. I mean, if he said that, you'd be like, yeah, it sounds about like something he'd say.
No, I would. I look, and I'm I'm listening to you. I go, you're a funny guy. I love your comedy, but that's not funny. We're gonna have 4 years of that nonsense.
You know, Rick, it's gonna be real funny, actually. You'll see. Just watch. Just watch. I mean, I talk a lot about the anticipatory anxiety of him arriving, much less what we're going to be dealing with every day. And, I just want to repeat to your audience and to you and to everybody what I repeat to myself and on my daily show, which is I have to find coping mechanisms or, cognitive behavioral exercises that won't allow his daily onslaught of horribleness and distraction to affect my relationships in my life and to affect my own mood. Do what I can as much as I can. But, so often in our lives, this man takes so much of our power and takes so much space in our heads. And it makes sense. It's not, it's not irrational. It's that I have to come up with new emotional coping mechanisms so that I can, when triggered, be mindful of it and be like, I'm not taking this out on someone I love or even myself. I'm not gonna let this ruin my afternoon. I'm gonna acknowledge it and I'm going to try to do something, whatever I can.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Oh,
it's something, not direct, something nice for somebody, even to make the moment better. So we have to adapt to him as we have to adapt to so many other things in life, it seems.
no, look, I've been saying the solutions that will come out of the suffering due to their savagery. I can't stop it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I have to prepare on how to fight when I can,
Yeah.
and to and to then build for a future where we can undo the damage that is coming. When hopefully those who are most affected, the ones who wear in the red hats, wake up to the reality that
I
when he
think
was
that's dead
talking
on.
about
I think what you're saying is well said and accurate that the suffering will come as solutions through what happens. I mean, we have to go through it
the
again.
point,
I mean, like I think the evidence of what you're saying is when he was president, the first nightmare that the only reason he didn't get reelected, arguably, was COVID. There
right?
had to be millions of Americans suffering, hundreds of thousands dying during his presidency and his mishandling of it for people to enough people, and it was a small margin to wake up and say, this guy didn't handle that well at all, or didn't even seem to care. And we need somebody who's going to be, be able to roll out a vaccine and support it, or else we might never get over this nightmare of COVID. And I'm not saying it's going to be a pandemic or anything like that, but it will be either some economic issue, some foreign policy disaster, some natural disaster that he mishandles. I mean, it's going to be something like that. And the
Or all
pain,
three.
or all three. And yeah, the pain could be really widespread. And unfortunately, that as you said, the suffering is going to be the solution, it would seem. And that's real daunting
And look,
idea.
in this country, we only address problems and we only unite around crisis. So I do believe what's coming out of this administration will be crisis. But here, the chaos merchants and the crisis merchants met on Friday in Magalago. You had the Freedom Caucus down at Magalago for a big powwow, and Trump trying to charm them on board. You had Doge Boy there, who made an appearance. Because
See
look, he
Elon or Vivek?
uh, well, Doge Boy. It's always going to be Elon because the other one, I, uh,
I just don't love it. I don't love Doge Boy because it almost feels like it's not giving him enough power. It's almost like not he's so much more than that. I mean, the guy is now interfering in so many other countries
yeah,
having to deal with him. And now to see the MAGA civil war taking place between Steve Bannon in as you call him, Doge Boy, that's fascinating. I didn't mean to interrupt you. So
but you
you
did.
can, so there's another MAGA event Friday. There's one tonight too.
Yeah, well, there was one Friday. There's one Sunday
Sunday.
where he's bringing people in to do their to schmooze and to meet Elon. And what I'm waiting for is for the bromance to break the two of them up, because I think that's going to be an interesting story, because Trump will tire of Musk, and Musk not going to take it well. I don't think he will go quietly into that good night. that Trump would want to put him into. So it's going to be interesting. And look, you even had, like you said, Steve Bannon saying, he's ready to get rid of. He's not prepared to tolerate Musk anymore, and that Trump should kick him out. So for me, that's
I mean, that's an understatement. I mean, Steve Bannon called him all kinds of names,
sure.
including a racist. Like Steve Bannon calling Elon Musk a racist
That's
is
something.
really something. Like that's
There's
me.
something
That's
about a
like
pot
me.
and a kettle.
Well, it's like me calling another bald guy super bald. Like, I mean, like what? You're all I can't quite figure out what the analogy is. They're all racists, and Steve Bannon's super racist, and he's calling Elon a racist. And I mean, that is something. And then he's basically saying all South Africans are racist. I am here for the Elon Bannon fight, but yeah, go ahead.
No. I think eventually Trump has to get rid of him, and Musk. He spent a lot of money. He's got a lot of ego there. I think it's going to be entertaining. I think that if anything stalls their steamroller, it will be that fight.
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like. I can't imagine. We're going to see some. It's going to come to a head.
Has to.
I mean, but I mean, he needs Elon Musk so much more than any one individual, and rightly so. Elon Musk did so much more than any one individual to get him reelected. So he also has something that nobody else has, which is 200 million followers on Twitter, and he owns the platform, and that matters a lot, I think. And it's like I just don't see him throwing Elon Musk away because Elon Musk is unlimited money. And that is something different than anyone else that Trump has ever allied with. Nobody has been that kind of resource to him. He is a constant funnel of unlimited cash. That is not someone that you burn down. And I think Trump's smart enough to know that.
Yeah, $500 billion. So the question then becomes, and because I've had these arguments with some of my conservative friends who are now looking at Musk and going, maybe we shouldn't have a guy worth $500 billion. Maybe there shouldn't be somebody who has this kind of outweighed power that could conceivably take down a president.
I mean, it's interesting that you're having those conversations with people who are Trump supporters, but I,
Well, because it came about because of the H-1B visa dust up. They're
right.
like, no, we got to get those immigrants out of here, and Musk's going to screw that up. That was an interesting little battleground right there.
Yeah, and he also, Steve Bannon is doing a pretty good job of at least paraphrasing, if he didn't quite say that Elon Musk called Americans lazy retards, the R word. I don't use much, but I'm quoting him, and they didn't like that, and understandably so. So these kind of issues, as I started to say about the fires, everything has to be a binary. The best media outlet and personality makes it this or that, black
Right.
or white,
Yeah.
you or me, tribal, binary, and Bannon's doing a pretty good job making Elon Musk that binary. He's for this, we're for that. It's not the same thing. And so, Bannon's a pretty powerful, influential media host, and we'll see where the others in that world line up. But this is starting off to be, it's going to be a big fight for a while.
So let me ask you, because then obviously the big inauguration, the coronation is coming up. Last question I've got for you. What are we expecting? Day one dictator. What are we expecting?
Flood the zone with it's going to be something that we're all going to have to decide how we're going to cover and how we're going to take it in and how much we're going to let it animate our lives, because that day one is going to be a storm of announcements and reversals of Biden era policies and appointments of cartoon villains that we haven't necessarily seen or heard, as well as behaviors. And on inauguration day, who all is going to show up. We saw all the presidents, ex-presidents, spouses at Jimmy Carter's funeral. And I mean, how much attention did that get in media? I mean, and there wasn't even a conversation. We just saw people talking and shaking or not shaking the former and future felon president's hand. And that got vacuumed up a lot of media space. And I'm sure Inauguration Day is going to be doing something similar. And the days after, they're going to flood the zone with controversial comments, appointments, and policies, and we're going to have to react. We're always having to react and be reactionary to day-to-day stuff, and it's exhausting. But what else are we supposed to do? I mean, you can't give up. As I mean, a lot of people are turning away and saying I can't do this anymore, and putting their heads in the sand, or trying to be optimistic about what might come, or
The
you
answer.
know, and I'm one of those. Who knows? We don't know exactly how bad it's going to be, or who it's going to be the worst for. There could be some things we're absolutely overblowing and overreacting to. So I'm here for outcomes that I couldn't predict it. But uncertainty, as you know more than anybody, Rick, is a real son of a and it sits on your shoulder, and it's just constantly knocking on you, going, you don't know what's going to happen, and you should worry.
There you go. Pete Dominick, appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Podcast Stand Up with Pete Dominick. We'll get links out on social media how you can check out his great work. Pete, as always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you very much.